Yeah, okay. So.
Okay. Right. Okay, so my thinking was,
I'm listening.
depending on what we kind of want to do with this, but
yeah.
Well,
don't worry, just because it's on doesn't mean we have to
know.
like start, but like, Charlie, I cannot. What? God, kid.
No, cats are needy enough. Never work with children and animals. This is really great that I can't talk properly.
Jenny, these vlog style videos are the worst because it's just me talking to me, and
Oh yeah.
and I just am in my own head about the thing that I want to say next, and I mess it up. I mess up the intro to my videos, like, hey guys, it's Margaret, whatever day. I mess it up at least 5 times before I get the right one. It's crazy.
Those podcast things take me a while. I'm just like, I love it.
I think it's easier when you have a dialogue, right? When there's 2 people, like...
Yeah, I mean, I'm literally... Well, oh yeah, hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard minute to hour ratio, but like I was hoping that this project would make me faster at that. But it doesn't help.
It probably is.
I don't know, because a lot of the time it's me just staring at like images of this face. And I'm just like, oh, that's what you look like. You look like this. And I'll ask Shin, I'm like, Shin, do I look like this? And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, cool.
People are watching them. They're not running away screaming.
I mean, people who are my mom and my 2 aunts. Well, I'm just trying so hard not to do a video about, like, Trump or, like, why I hate guns. Because the minute that gets posted, like, my family's going to be like...
Right, okay. I'm going to start.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start.
Mm-hmm.
So now, 8:30. Okay. Yeah, no, I don't even know what tone we're doing now. Oh my god.
It's fine.
Right, let's just roll. Let's just try.
Hello.
Everyone. My name is Jen Sutherland. I am from England, as you might be able to tell already, and I am a dear acquaintance of Miss Margaret Price.
It's true. She's my dear acquaintance. My dear acquaintance.
My dear acquaintance.
My close somebody I kind of know.
Yeah, so we met in Japan, in Aizu. We sort of but we moved in the same circles, in the same area, because that's what you do.
The one circle.
Yes, so I was out in Japan for 2 years, 2.5 years. I was in ALT for 1 year in the Aizu area, and then I moved to a fake English village. That's a whole different story. For another year, and then for 3 months I cleaned hostels in Hiroshima and Kyoto because I'd had enough of teaching English. And before that I did exchange year in Nagoya, having studied anthropology and Japanese for my undergraduate degree. So that is my relation to Japan.
Perfect. Yeah, so like you said, I think I came to Aizu maybe like 6 or 7 months before you did. Yeah, and then we met through another mutual friend who thought that we would get along, and we did. We both have backgrounds in anthropology and Japanese culture. But I think, and I don't want to blame Japan for that. So, I mean, I do always get yelled at.
I mean,
Shin always yells at me when I'm ever, like, complaining about Japan, and which is constantly. But I would say, the caveat that I provide is I would probably do the same thing if I was in America, right? If I were in America, I'd probably go, America all the time, right? Because you're in the culture, you're living the indignities of the culture, like, in real time. And then the second is, like, foreigners, as you once were, like living in a culture that is not your own for an extended period of time. I'm not talking about like vacations or even like I would say more than a year, right? So you've got to get through that first year and probably into the second year before you start realizing that every society has its own issues. You get deeper into the culture, you start integrating yourself into local society, and you're like, oh, like, no, this is messed up, or like, that's messed up. You can still appreciate the culture that you're in. But
I'm very happy that I did the hostel thing after, because I quit my job and I was so, I mean, you know, big issue, but like I was so in my own head at that point. I was just like, get me out. And I did not want to leave the country feeling like that. But, okay, so today.
Right, what are we doing?
So, for a bit of focus for our discussion, Because, as I said, I studied anthropology and Japanese in my first degree. One of the textbooks was
this, and it's
is the idea of Japan. I've been calling it the image of Japan.
Same thing.
And I've just realised I got that wrong. This is the idea of Japan. Western Images, Western Myths by a man called Ian Littlewood. I don't know what he's doing with himself now. As you might be able to guess, it's, you know, this exploration of images and concepts and all that kind of stuff about Japan by Western people.
So, 2 questions. When was the book written?
That's what I was going to say. It was 1996 that this was published, so it is now 20 years old.
Right.
Which is why I thought it would be very interesting to discuss it, especially in terms of, do we feel that his points are still relevant? Do we feel like anything's changed?
Right.
Anything like that.
And is the author British, or do you know where he's from? What's his background?
I think he is, you know. I think, how would you say? It doesn't talk about Japan from Japan's perspective or Japan's perspective of the West.
Okay.
It's very much only only the images that have been produced in the West or from Western people about Japan. I don't feel like, what is very interesting is certainly Littlewood argues that from the very beginning Japan was different. I mean, every area, every country in this regard will have its own, you know, sort of history with colonialism and Western interaction. But so Westerners in Japan appeared in 1543,
right.
And they were primarily, it was saying they were mostly Portuguese and mostly Jesuits. I don't know if that necessarily means that they were all Portuguese Jesuits, but that was kind of the big group of Westerners that were over there. And they were obviously trying to convert everyone.
Right.
And writers at the time, there was this feeling. Basically, the key word in all this is paradox. Japanese society, Japanese people for Westerners presented a paradox. And this has literally continued since the 1500s.
Okay.
So these writers were just like, we've got a bit of a problem here. You know, these guys, they look different to us, they dress different to us, they sound different. They're obviously not us, so they belong in savage side of things. But it's really weird. They're civilized. They're really hung up on etiquette. They're really polite. They've got a really hierarchical society. That's what we see as civilized. But they're savages. But they're concerned. The West and Christianity were one, and they were like, no, we don't, get out. The Portuguese sent fleet's not the right word, but they sent a load of people who were quite eminent citizens to go like, please, you know, we can work this out, guys. We can work this out. And the Japanese at the other end killed all but 13 of them and sent them back to go, tell them we mean, like, we're not fucking around here.
We don't want you here. Yeah.
And it worked for 200 years. And for 200 years, as far as anyone but, like, the Dutch they were trading with, were like, Japan doesn't exist. What? So there was that. And obviously, I think everyone can agree that 200 years of isolation has coloured Japanese history quite a lot. Whether it's that the actual reality of that happening, or whether that's retrospectively people going like, well, they've had this 200 years of isolation, no one else has done that, so that makes them plenty of
people have had isolationist policies, but I do think it has definitely what do I want to say? I do think that the idea of this closed door period, it colors Japan's interpretation of itself. I do.
Yeah. 200 years is a really long time.
Right? And and they were still making technological advances within their own country. Like, they were still preceding culture. They didn't, like, stop creating culture, right? Like, they were still evolving culturally, but I don't know.
Or, like, perfectly peaceful, and everything was lovely, and it was just samurai writing poetry.
Samurai writing poetry. Their
That
main
was
job.
That was all that happened.
Their primary job as samurai was writing poetry.
They were so peaceful.
They're falling in love. They're so peaceful, making tea.
You got the West, and you got this sort of big black line between the two, and it's kind of like
Never the twain
you
shall
got the
meet.
West, which is awesome because we say we are, and then the East, which is like.
Well, it's
Sorry, guys, you're just a bit slow.
you see a lot of the in that sort of rhetoric and that sort of wheelhouse. You see a lot of the same things that Western culture says about women put onto Eastern cultures. Like they're in charge of the mysterious. They're not as scientifically oriented, but they're artful. That sort of.
So this kind of things don't fall into our categories perfectly, so we get a bit freaked out. In 1904, T.W.H. Crossland said, "Our deadliest enemy in the Far East is not Russia, but Japan, for she openly and avowedly set herself out to be the England of the Orient.
Ew.
We do not require any Englands in the Orient."
It's very British.
No, we've got a perfect good England here.
We don't require any English in the Orient. Like, oh my god. Lovely. I love it.
Do you think he saw, like, in 100 years' time, people are going to be pissing themselves laughing?
Well, he's just like, oh, they're very educated, and it's the same narrative of women. Like, oh, she thinks a lot of herself because she can read. Like,
This is another thing that Lilwood talks about. It's kind of, Westerners were like, we're better than savages because, we have, like, guns and trains and shit.
Yeah.
And we tried handing it over to them, and they're like, they don't even know how to use it. What an idiot. But then when they do hand stuff over and the natives pick it up, make it better.
I love Ruth Benedict. Love that book.
I did read it, and the context around it was really interesting.
Yeah.
That she never set foot in Japan, primarily because we were at war.
Right.
And like she like it wasn't. She was just like, I'm not going to that shithole. But no, she physically couldn't.
That shithole.
I just realised that's actually now a really noted phrase.
Oh man, yeah, Trump's ruining everything. Yay. Okay.
But she never
went to the country that she wrote a book about. Yeah.
Yeah, she was just interviewing
Japanese people,
first generation, second generation in America. But she was very even-handed for the time. For Sir Rutherford Alcock, great name, in 1863 said Japan is essentially a country of paradoxes and anomalies. Douglas Sladen, 1892. Said, "It is such a queer, contradictory, upside-down sort of country."
It's not Wonderland. Come on now. Okay.
it's just Percival Lowell, 1888. The Japanese speak backwards, read backwards, and write backwards. Not that they have their own system.
Oh, do they mean that like the grammar is arranged differently? Speak backwards?
Yeah, I mean, he obviously doesn't speak Japanese.
No, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And you can write Japanese either way. Here's another thing.
His argument, which I think is very interesting and true, is that stereotypes do come from somewhere. They do. Like, you can't just fabricate a stereotype out of nowhere because it needs to have some sort of grounding.
Right.
However, the problem is, he doesn't use this phrase, but the danger is the confirmation bias that then.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like the perspective from which you're judging things like dancing or culture. Absolutely. Okay. Good. Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah, and he's saying the problem is you have these stereotypes, and then if you do nothing but rely on those, and you have nothing to contradict them, even then when you come into things that directly contradict the stereotype that you have, you don't register them. You don't. Yeah, it's just kind of like it just.
Well, you ignore them. Yeah,
it's the way of seeing the world, and you're never going to break out of that. And that's the danger of it, that you rely too much on them and just go, right, that's true, we're done.
Right.
No need to. Kind of like when that voice is just like, you're not good enough, you're not doing enough. Why aren't you better?
I've never heard that voice before. What are you talking about?
You know what the front of this book is? You know what the front of my notebook is?
What?
My friend got me this.
Oh no.
And he's like, I thought of you in the nicest possible way.
I doubt. Oh no.
Just by your own overthinking.
Oh no.
It's going, I'm not good enough. It's kind of difficult because on the one hand, obviously, that voice is, for the most part, debilitating. Like, it stops you from believing in yourself.
For the most part, debilitating.
And I can say that for, like, my journey. My journey of Japanese. I've been studying Japanese for, like, a long, long time. I realised one of the things holding me back so much for such a long time is I just flat out didn't believe I could ever be fluent. And when you don't think you can do something, you're not going to do it.
Right.
But like, it's in my head, I'm like, I could never do that. Like, that's I don't know why.
No. I mean, learning a foreign language is really daunting. And I think especially so when you pride yourself on your fluency in English. And like I would say that we both consider ourselves pretty verbal. And then to try to learn a new language, you want to be as thoughtful in that foreign language as you are in English. And then if you can't do that, like if the best you can do is, like, I think we do have to come to grips with, like, we'll never be as fluent in Japanese as we are in English, only because we weren't grown in that culture. We don't know all of the nuances of all of the ways to use words, different syntaxes. Like, there is a limit to our ability to communicate in this language, but I think it's entirely possible to become fluent. Like, I don't think...
You know? Like,
I'm far more aggressive in Japan than I was...
What?
Yeah.
What?
I had... Jenny! Like, oh my God! I have to tell you. Oh no. Okay, so I'm acting very sanguine and like accepting of my position here in Japan. 2 weeks ago, I was at the grocery store. I was crossing through the parking lot. And this guy and his girlfriend were walking into the grocery store, right? And so I've got a leather jacket on and I have sunglasses on. I have things on. He looks around once and I'm like, okay, I'll give it to him. It's fine. He looks around once. He turns back. He whispers to his girlfriend. He turns around again and is like staring. And I stop and I stare back at him. Like I'm stopped and like I've recognized, and usually that's the end of it, right? Usually once you've stared back at them, they'll be like, oh, I'm very sorry, like, and then walk away. This bro turned around again, stood still while his girlfriend like got confused about why he had stopped, stared at me. Jenny, I ripped my sunglasses off and I'm like, what? I just yelled, what? In the parking lot. And he's just like, You're so angry. I was so angry at this guy. And I was just like, I hope you have a great life, sir. I don't know what to do with you.
It's just insane. And like, so I don't want to encroach on experiences that I cannot possibly know about. But this is putting me in mind of, I was listening to a podcast. I think it was Radiolab actually. And it was one person saying it was about kind of I'm mashing two in my head now. I think it might have been about that ice skater, Black French ice skater. If you read it.
Oh! Somebody was talking about that on Facebook. Yes, and how she's the first Black French ice skater to represent the country.
Yeah, I think it might have been that one because I don't think it was her. I think it was somebody else who commented, who were Black themselves, that. Racism makes Black people crazy. I think that was their quote. And it's that kind of like, when it is this kind of something that's kind of relentless.
Yes. The microaggression.
And so it's just like you keep getting these experiences, just like one after the other, until you're just like, oh my God. And you end up quite aggressive. And then to the point where it instills this paranoia that possibly even when it is, racism is nowhere to be seen in a situation, you're still just like, is it? Am I?
No, absolutely.
And you're questioning everything.
And I think that's especially why, as white women, I think it drove us so crazy, right? We're not used to that in our home cultures, right? Because we're white. I would love to hear the experiences of like Black ALTs from English speaking
Yes.
countries that are not white. I wonder how they deal with it. Like anytime I talk to a
Yeah.
Japanese person about a foreigner they know, they're more likely to tell me about their country than their ethnicity.
I think so. I don't think I've had too many examples of that, of people talking about. Do you know what? This is not necessarily relevant, but I kind of I was like, I like that. I was in one of the hostels, and you kind of got the door and then sort of reception behind a counter, and I was standing in front of the counter, and my friend who works there was behind the reception, and these two guys came in, white foreign guys, and they walked in, and they managed to leave the door ajar, and my friend looked at me and went, "Oh, they're Christian," and I kind of went, "What's that? What?" And I was like, I thought he was just saying like, "Oh, you know, by the way, they're Christian," and I got really confused. I was like, "What's that got to do with anything? Like, I don't even know their like, who are they?" And I was like, and it turned out he said that because they left the door open.
It's so
I
funny.
don't know if you've come across this before.
Christians
so-
leave door. I love this stereotype. This is my favorite stereotype. Oh my god.
I just, if I understood what he was saying correctly, you know, like in certainly the UK, it's like if you leave the door open, they'd be like, "You born in a barn or something?"
Yeah.
Whereas because church doors are always open, if you leave the door open, they're like, "What are you, Christian or something?"
This is my new favorite stereotype. I'm going to use it all the time. Oh no.
I was like, "That's amazing."
I love it. Podcast. Like your podcast is this
I
very
doubt it would be devalued. I
No.
think its value would increase.
No, your podcast is very narrative, very I would say academic, and in that way sort of beautiful and structured. And I love it, and I would hate to detract from that, but I also think that there is value in the kinds of conversations that we're having right now, where some of it gets a little silly and some of it gets emotional and some of it gets academic. Like I think that blend is also valuable, but I don't want it to ruin the flavor of what you've already done with the Folding Fan on the podcast. It'll be like a commercial for the podcast. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Like this is what we look like doing it.
Yeah.
But you can't see that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a thing.
Yeah.
Oosh. Audio files, I've gotta clean them up and send them to you. 2 hours of talking. 5 minutes of
Yeah.
usable content. Your hair looks clean.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, no,
I did
like
it.
it wasn't perfect. I kept taking us off thing, but I definitely think this was a valuable stepping stone, right? Because one, we both got together. We got to discuss a topic semi-coherently. There were some, I think, good emotional points that were really like listenable.